Oh, hello, old friend. It's good to see you. Let's talk about this word, fascination. It describes an unquenchable urge which compels our hearts to quest and be captivated. As long as there are elegant explanations to complicated phenomena, science will never lose its romance. Over the years, I've traveled the world, indulging in my fascination in physics. And now, I find that a new hunger has woken within me. A fiery need to share these great ideas with the people around me. And so, I have assembled a team of some of the greatest, most lucid, most creative minds I've encountered in my travels. And I call them my Titanium Physicists. You're listening to the Titanium Physicists Podcast, and I'm Ben Tippett. And now, allez, physique! Let's say your city gets attacked. Hedera attacks your city. Hedera is a pollution monster, by the way. All of the pollution in your city decides that destroying people with asthma is too slow. So instead, the pollution glues itself together into one big monster and then starts smushing people. That's right. Smushing them like ants. Smushing. So, what are you going to do? You could probably kill it with guns and bulldozers and chemicals, but that would take too long, and by the time you defeated it, the city would be smushed. So instead, what do? You summon Godzilla. Godzilla, if you haven't heard, is radioactive. It's the living embodiment of radioactivity, actually, and he's really good at killing things. Really good at killing things. Better at killing things than anything else in the world. So if you summon Godzilla, drag him up from the ocean, he'll deal with Hedera. And if you do everything just right, he won't crush your city on the way in or out. Today we're going to be talking about this. Well, not specifically. Today we're going to be talking about how physicists have learned to use radiation to deal with cancer. Now, Chad Jones is the host of the Collapsed Wavefunction podcast. It's a show where a bunch of chemists talk about radical chemistry to each other and also about culture and news. Does it sound like a familiar format? Yes, indeed. The Collapsed Wavefunction is one of the newest shows on the Brachytherapy Media Network, and Chad is a graduate student studying physical chemistry at Brigham Young University. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Hello.
So, Chad, for you today, I've assembled two of my finest titanium physicists. Magnificent. Arise, Dr. Ken Clark.
Whoosh.
Dr. Ken did his PhD at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and he's currently at the University of Toronto, where he studies neutrinos at IceCube. Now arise, Dr. Kiri Nichol. Dr. Kiri did her undergraduate degree with me at UBC, and she did her PhD at Leiden University in the Netherlands. She's an expert at radiotherapy, and she's currently a magnificently clever but currently unemployed data scientist. So if you'd like to hire a wonderful data scientist, get in touch with me and I'll get you in touch with Kiri. All right, everybody, let's talk about radiotherapy. So, Chad, do you know anything about radiation therapy?
I know a bit. Not a whole lot. My mother works for a radiation oncologist, and I worked in a radiology lab for a couple of years, but just in the digital image management part of it.
So analogously, if you were in a gold mine, you would be the person pushing the carts full of gold and not the person appraising its value.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Well, let's talk about all those carts of gold. Specifically, let's start talking about how radiation kills stuff. Because that's what's really going on, right?
Right.
The idea here is that radiation is a better candidate at killing the cells in your tumor than anything else. How does radiation kill tissue, Ken?
Oh, well, that's really interesting stuff. So the radiation that we'll probably be talking most about is gamma radiation. So that's basically high-energy photons. So what happens is these high-energy particles, they shoot through your skin and go into the tissue. And once they're in the tissue, because photons interact with charged particles, they deposit a lot of energy that way. And the really important part is that they'll deposit a lot of energy and blast apart the DNA in the cells. I mean, there's a few other ways that they can kill things, but the main one is that they blast apart the DNA. So then that cell, obviously it can't replicate anymore. Once your DNA is done, the cell is toast. It is non-functional anymore. So that's in essence how that radiation kills cells.
Part of my research in my graduate program has been related a bit to cancer. I don't know, everybody's research is related to cancer if you're writing the right grant, but chemotherapy drugs, a lot of them work by cross-linking the DNA, getting them all jumbled up. And the analogy that I thought of is if you imagine you have a group of runners that are about to start a 100-meter dash, those chemotherapy drugs are like a ninja that comes around and ties the shoelaces of the runner's left shoe to their right shoe. And so the runner, which in this analogy is DNA, by the way, doesn't notice that anything's wrong until the gun goes off and they start the race. And instead of running, they fall flat on their face. And that's like apoptosis. And then you have radiation therapy, which instead of the ninja coming out and tying the shoelaces together, it just breaks the runner's legs.
Yeah.
So it just ionizing radiation that blasts the DNA.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe this is a good time to note that radiation and chemotherapy often get used together because the effect of the two of them together is more than you would get from just adding the effects of each one.
Why is that, though? I mean, why isn't it just additive? The effects from chemotherapy plus the effects from radiation?
That's probably actually a really profound question that I think people are trying to figure out. Yeah, that's a hard problem. So
yeah, I would have guessed that it would just be additive. The effects from whatever the chemotherapy was plus the effects from whatever the radiation therapy was, but...
Well, the good news is it's not, so...
Yeah, that is good news.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe the best way to start this discussion is different types of radiation can be used to treat different types of cancer, depending on what type of cancer it is and where it is in your body. So, Kiri, let's say I've just gotten lung cancer. I go to the doctor says, hey, you need radiation therapy. What happens then?
When doctors discover that a patient has a tumor and they decide to treat it with radiation, the first thing they do is they send you off to have a CT scan, maybe an MRI scan. And then some doctors are going to get together and they're going to look and they're going to try to decide where they think the cancer cells are or where they think the tumor is in your body. And this is a hard problem because you can't see individual cancer cells. You can only see, like on a CT scan, like 1 millimeter resolution. So the doctors use their knowledge of what regular anatomy looks like and then they try to figure out where the tumor is. And then another technician will go in and identify other organs. So they actually draw contours around organs like your heart, your spinal cord, your salivary glands. So tissues that are healthy that you don't want to give radiation to. And then you have to come up with a way to give as much radiation as possible to the tumor while minimizing the amount of radiation you give to the healthy tissue. And actually solving this problem is a problem that a computer has to do. And it takes the computer a couple of hours to figure out what the best way is to put the radiation in so that you get the most radiation on the tumor and minimize the radiation to healthy tissue. And one trick you can use is that you can rotate the source of the radiation around the patient. So as the radiation source is rotating around the patient, it gives a little bit of radiation to the healthy tissue and then radiation to the tumor, but then it rotates. So now it's giving a little bit of radiation to different healthy tissue, but still giving radiation to the tumor. And so by rotating the radiation source around the patient, you can give a lot more radiation to the tumor and minimize the dose to the healthy tissue.
So the deal is, Chad, you can kill a tumor with a shotgun, right? You just have to go up to the person and shoot them through the torso with the shotgun where the tumor is. What's the problem with that technique?
Right, well, that's going to kill the person.
So radiation poses a similar problem. You might have a tumor on your lungs or something. It's surrounded with tissue that you don't want to destroy. And so one of the interesting things about this particular technique, essentially they're cooking the tumor with x-rays, but the trick is to do so in a way that doesn't destroy everything else. The first thing you have to do is kind of figure out where the tumor is. I like to think about this as like a fire. Imagine you've got a big mansion, and one of the rooms in the library is on fire. So the fire department comes, and they're like, oh, we're going to put out the fire. Hold on, we're just going to smash down this wall and pour all the water in, and that will put out the fire. And you say, no, I've got a whole bunch of Fabergé eggs behind that wall. So what the first thing the fire department does is they're like, oh, fine, I guess we have to be careful about this. We're still going to pump water from our pumpy truck into the fire. How are we going to do it? You take out a map of your mansion and you say, okay, you point on the map, this is the room where all the fire is. And they say, okay, I guess we have to shoot water at it. And you say, no, I've got very nice carpeting in this room, in this room, in this room. So what they do is they say, okay, we can shoot some water through this window, some water through this window, some water through this window. That way the carpets in those regions won't get too wet, but we'll end up still pouring the same amount of water onto the fire. And then you say, okay. So these doctors, they take a three-dimensional scan of your body, right? So a CT scan, that's like an X-ray. It's a three-dimensional X-ray where they're rotating the beam of X-rays through you, and a computer is compiling all of them and figuring out where all your guts are and your bones and your liver and kidney and stuff. Or they put you in an MRI machine, which does...
Maybe I can add that when you are in an MRI or when you get a CT image made of your body, the doctors, they have to look at it and figure out where all the organs are. They have to figure out where the tumor is. And that's actually the hardest part of the problem because... I'd like to go to your analogy with the room on fire. Maybe you say the library is on fire, but maybe the bathroom next to it's on fire. Maybe the bedroom downstairs from the library is on fire as well, but you don't know that. The problem is with imaging, you can't tell where cancer cells are. You can only see where the tumor is. So you have a pretty good idea of what you need to give radiation to, but there still could be other cells rambling around which are cancer, which you don't know are there, so you can't decide to give radiation to them.
So is that why you would want chemotherapy as well to help with that? Because
that's probably
chemotherapy you're targeting everywhere.
That's right.
So I know that people that I've seen that have had radiation therapy, a lot of them have tattoos for targeting, right?
When you go to get radiation therapy, they have to be able to line your body up with the beam of radiation. So if you have little marks on your outside of your body, it makes it easier for them to get you approximately in the right position relative to the source of radiation. And then what happens in a lot of hospitals is that they'll make a CT scan of your body and they figure out where your bones are, and then they can move the table that the patient is lying on so that the position of the patient's bones during treatment better matches the positions of the patient's bones on the planning CT. So you can use the patient's skeleton as a proxy for the position of the tumor.
So those tattoos aren't necessarily marking where the tumor is. It's marking so they can get back to the same position as the planning CT?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I mean, actually, that's one of the bigger problems, too, is that if you have a tumor close to your bladder or close to your rectum or in your lung, then that tumor moves around a lot. So the position of the tumor and when the radiation dose was planned is actually probably going to be different during the treatment. So you have to have a bit of a margin. You have to make the radiation dose strike some of the healthy tissue in order to be sure that you're going to be giving radiation to the tumor.
So we have this radiation beam. What's like the diameter of the beam?
It depends actually on the size of the tumor. I mean, the smallest tumor you can really see on a CT scan would be like 2 or 3 millimeters. Mm-hmm. And you can actually control the shape and the size of the beam. You can set it to be just a little bit larger than the tumor.
When you said control the shape, I just imagined shooting a star-shaped beam. I know you're probably meaning like it's more of an ellipse, right? But I'm picturing like a star.
Yeah. As the machine that delivers the radiation is rotating around you, they can actually change the shape of the radiation beam as the machine is moving. I mean, you don't really ever have perfectly round tumors. So as the machine rotates, you can change the shape of the beam to match the outline of the tumor in profile in that direction.
How much of that is done in real time, and how much of that is just based off a plan? You get into the machine and this is the program we were going to run, or is there a technician that's changing the beam profile in real time? Okay,
this is a problem that a computer has to solve. It takes hours for the computer to figure out what the most optimal solution is for putting radiation into the patient. So the computer controls the rotational position of the machine as it's rotating around the patient, and it controls the shape of the beam. So when the radiation beam is emitted, you can change the shape of it by covering up parts of it. And all that is done by the computer prior to the patient coming in for treatment.
It's kind of like, if you had a flashlight and you wanted to make the shadow of a bunny on the wall, you would kind of cover up part of the beam with your hand, I guess, and your hand would absorb that radiation and the rest would hit the wall.
Yeah.
They've got these, they're cool, they're they're computer controlled, but essentially they're like leaves of, what are they, lead?
I think.
And they just block off the beam, and they're dynamic, so the computer moves these lead leaves in and out to block off parts of the beams, essentially makes a shadow so that so coming out of the machine, it's like your regular ellipse or circle or whatever shape, and then it goes through this kind of beam shaping device that makes essentially a big shadow, so that it can block off the part that would otherwise hit your spleen.
So I joked about making a star shape, but you're saying if you happen to have a star-shaped tumor, that would be possible.
Yeah, you could actually. The beam shaper looks like a bunch of fingers. If you put one hand up in front of you and the other hand upside down on top of that, you can kind of slide your fingers up and down relative to each other, and you can make different shapes just by moving your fingers in and out. Yeah, I think it's even called a finger call.
I want to paint a little picture of what this device looks like. So you've been in a CT scan machine or an MRI machine. The doctor now has a three-dimensional kind of map of what your guts look like and where the tumor is. And then you get brought in and you get laid down on a bench. They can move the bench back and forth, up and down a little bit to position you a little bit. And then the device itself that emits the radiation, it's kind of like like a C-clamp sort of shaped, right? It's shaped like a C, and then it rotates around your body. So it will rotate around your body axially. It will shoot the shaped beam of X-rays through your body from all angles as it rotates around your body, so that it's not cooking your spinal cord, it's not cooking your heart, but every chance it gets, it's shooting a beam through, so that the place where all these beams will overlap at the center of where it's rotating, your tumor will get the large dose of radiation, and the rest of the things only gets lightly burnt.
That's the idea.
Okay.
So this machine's called a radiation therapy machine. A nice therapeutic sounding title for what it is.
So what's making the X-rays? What's the material that's sending out these X-rays?
That's actually pretty cool, too. So what it is, it's an accelerator. So essentially what you do is you take electrons and accelerate them so they're going really fast, and then you just smash them into a target. So you get this thing, the name is called Bremsstrahlung, but what really happens is as the electrons interact with the nuclei and stuff in the target, they slow down, and because they slow down and energy has to be conserved, they produce these X-rays, basically. So they use this Bremsstrahlung to create all of these X-rays. And Bremsstrahlung is interesting in that it has kind of a unique signature in terms of its energy spectrum. So you get a fairly well-defined energy spectrum for the X-rays that come out, which is one of the reasons why they use it.
So, a well-defined energy spectrum, you mean that it's not like a broadband X-rays, it's narrow?
Yeah, comparatively narrow. You get X-rays focused at certain energies, basically. So, because you can do that, I assume makes it easier to determine, the dose and what you should do with these X-rays. So that's one of the reasons why it would be used for radiation therapy.
So it's hitting the target. What's the target made of? What material?
I think the target can vary, but it'll be a metal of some kind. So you get a metal that's not dense enough to, that it interferes with the X-rays leaving, but it has a lot of big heavy nuclei and free electrons, so that the accelerated electrons can interact with it.
And how fast are these electrons going? Because you said fast, but now I'm curious as to what that means.
Yeah, that's a good question. How fast are these electrons going?
Are they looking up on Wikipedia fast, or just making it up in your head fast?
No. If you want an actual number for the speed, it's probably look it up in Wikipedia fast. Because normally, you would give their kind of energy in terms of, GeV or something like that. But but that's not a number that's really very useful. So to convert that to actual velocity, fast.
Yeah. Okay, we'll stick with fast. Back to the question, I'm thinking about how the X-rays are made.
Right, okay.
It seems to me it's just like the opposite of the photoelectric effect. Because you have photons of a given energy coming in for the photoelectric effect, and then electrons coming off. This is electrons coming in and photons coming out.
Okay, so in the photoelectric effect, a photon comes in and one atom grabs it. Okay? And then as that atom grabs it, an electron takes all that energy and says, I'm moving out, and jumps off the electron. Okay? That's a little bit different than Bremsstrahlung. It's German for breaking radiation, as in breaks up the car and not smashing. Anyway.
Okay.
So in Bremsstrahlung, what happens is if you have a charged particle moving really fast through a medium, like water or a desk or a big piece of metal, what happens is as it's moving, it's a charged particle. It's surrounded with other things that are charged, other electrons and protons. They don't token to the fact that this electron is moving so fast among them. And so they all kind of grab their little hooks into it. And so it's kind of an overall effect. It comes from the bulk, this compendium, this large group of atoms, instead of just interacting with one single one. And so the net effect is, as the electron passes through, it will kind of generate a whole bunch of electromagnetic waves in the direction it was moving. In essence, all of its kinetic energy gets turned by the fact that it's surrounded by other charged particles in these atoms into photons. So all of its kinetic energy goes into electromagnetic waves, and it slows down. It breaks.
That's right. I mean, the photoelectric effect is a nuclear effect. Like, it's actually just involves the atoms themselves and the energy levels of the electrons. Whereas Bremsstrahlung, it really is exactly what Ben said. It's just because you're decelerating these electrons that are moving really rapidly, you have to produce some kind of energy, and you produce it in these waves of high energy photons. It's like running in a beach, and because, as you're trying to run really quickly, so let's say you're on pavement and you hit the beach. When you hit the beach, you're going to start spraying sand everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Because you're giving off this energy into the sand. It's a lot harder to move through the sand than it is through the pavement or something.
Hey, Kiri, do you want to say anything about what types of cancers you use this on?
So when you are treating somebody with cancer, you have a couple different choices for treatment. You can give them chemotherapy, you can do surgery to remove the tumor, or you can give them radiation. And often a combination of two or more of these methods is used. In cases where it's possible to physically remove the tumor, for breast cancer, when the patient is healthy enough to be able to recover from the surgery, then often surgery is the first choice. And then the doctors will go along and give some chemotherapy and radiation therapy to try to catch any cancer cells that they might have missed when they removed the tumor physically. But in some cases, when the patient is too old to recover from surgery, or when the tumor is in a place where you can't really just go in and chop out the tumor, then radiation and chemotherapy are better choices.
Okay, so yeah, let's start talking about brachytherapy. So the deal is that there's other types of radiotherapy that we can give to somebody with cancer, not just cook their insides selectively with X-rays.
So another way to kill tumor cells with radiation is to use a radioactive source that you actually just put inside the patient and leave there. And this is done for breast cancer, or for prostate cancer. So you get a little radioactive seed, so it's only a few millimeters big, and then you just poke it inside the patient, and that little particle will emit radiation for maybe a centimeter or a centimeter and a half around the particle, and then that will kill the cells that are close to that radioactive seed, but the radiation will be completely weakened by the time you get a centimeter and a half away from that seed. So then you don't do harm to tissue outside of that little area around the seed.
It's equivalent to, we were talking about spraying through the windows with hoses. It's equivalent to going into the house that's burning and throwing water balloons at where the fire is. So you're not damaging everything past the splash radius, which is fairly small, of the water balloons, and anything you're killing is already on fire. So,
well,
do you know any firemen?
No. Do you?
Yes. I don't think that's how they fight fires.
with the water balloons. Yeah.
I mean, my son would probably fight fire with a water balloon, but
maybe a ceiling sprinkler is a better metaphor. But whatever.
I was going to add that, when you're treating somebody with cancer, you want them to survive, but at the same time, you want to kill the cancer so they survive, but you want to make sure that they have a decent quality of life for however long they may live after they've been treated. And so you want to make sure that you don't, go around exploding water balloons in places, or, go around giving radiation to places where there's no cancer, because people will end up with burns and, they'll have problems going to the bathroom and problems swallowing. And that kind of really spoils your life. So you want to make sure that, on the one hand, you want to make sure you kill the tumor, but on the other hand, you don't want to damage people's healthy cells so badly that their life becomes really unpleasant after their treatment.
Now that you bring that up, I mean, I know people that have gone through chemotherapy, and so, I mean, like, I know personally the effects that has on people. How does radiation therapy compare as far as, I guess the medical term is morbidity? That's
actually a good question. I'm not super sure I can give a great answer to, but I can give an okay answer. So chemo destroys the ability of cells to reproduce themselves, but if they can recover from that, they can go on and they're not as affected. With radiation therapy, you're actually damaging the DNA, or effectively you're burning somebody. That's when you get a sunburn. That's a kind of a radiation burn. You can give a person a burn that the cells can't really recover from. It would be like an internal burn on your insides. And also, because you're damaging the DNA, you're ruining the ability of the cell to repair itself. So you're actually increasing the chance that a couple years down the road that the person could develop a cancer that's related to the radiation that you're giving them to try to kill their previous cancer. So you run that risk as well.
So there are other types of radiation that we can use to cure cancer. One of the funnest ones is proton therapy, right, Ken?
Absolutely, yeah. Proton therapy is great. So proton therapy is really cool because you get to use all these accelerators that all the, really important physicists get to play with. But one of the advantages, so instead of using gamma rays, you can use protons instead. You can accelerate them and shoot them into, where the cancer is, which they can only be in certain places, which maybe I'll come back to later. But one of the advantages is as protons travel through matter, they start to deposit energy. As they slow down, the cross-section increases. So as they slow down, they get more and more likely to deposit their energy. So what ends up happening is, if you kind of think of them depositing, they'll go for a while, deposit a little bit of energy, and then all of a sudden, they'll just deposit all of their energy all at once because their cross-section has become so large. So you can use this to really target tumors. The problem being that if you want to use protons, it has to be in a place which is very constant density all around so that you can really calculate where that energy is going to be deposited. So one of the big uses that they have for these things is like in cancers in your eye. So they can use this proton therapy to actually target the depth at which they want all of this energy to be deposited. And so it kind of like what Kiri was explaining earlier, where instead of just cooking all the tissue on the way in, so you have to move your X-ray gun all around, you can just shoot these protons in and know that they will deposit almost all of their energy within a very short distance of where you want the tumor to be. So it ends up being this really cool way to kind of, get at the tumor.
So I guess my question on this would be the difficulty in targeting. So, I mean, if you're thinking about like an eye, I'm just imagining somebody lying on a table. Is that how the patient is in these?
I think they're actually sitting up because to make the protons, you need a particle accelerator. And so the protons are traveling parallel to the surface of the Earth. So that means you have to be sitting up, and then you basically look at the beam, and the beam comes in your eye and dumps the energy.
Oh, okay. For proton therapy, what's the proton source and how is that made?
This is, I think, one of the issues with proton therapy is you essentially need one of these really big accelerators. You need to be done at a location, mostly universities. Like we were talking earlier, Triumph in Vancouver does it, and I know SLAC does proton therapy and those kind of things. But so it's just essentially you have the giant ring where you separate the protons, and then you just use the electromagnetic fields to accelerate them really quickly, and then you just divert them into the eye, I guess, eventually. But so it's not something that can be done anywhere. You need a lot of equipment to be able to pull this off.
You need a particle accelerator.
Yeah.
And not like the chintzy ones inside the radiation therapy machines.
Well, those are cool in their own right.
They're cool, but they're not, great big melt something particle accelerators.
No, here you're going to need storage ring and, proton. Yeah, you need a lot of equipment to be able to do this kind of thing.
So obviously we're not talking about an accelerator the size of CERN, but how large of an accelerator are we talking about for proton therapy?
In terms of actual size?
In terms of the size of the area it would be in.
I mean, you wouldn't need one as big as CERN, but you're talking building sized, at least.
Like a hockey arena.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still really impressive to me.
Oh, it's very cool. I mean,
because
this is neat stuff.
Can I add to just at the end to say that even though it's pretty amazing that you can kill cancer cells with radiation, because the side effects are are so shitty, it's better not to get cancer in the first place. And the dream is that in 50 years we won't have to give radiation to anybody to treat cancer, because there'll be biological tools, genetic tools that we can use to kill cancers on the cellular level rather than having to just carpet bomb all of the tissue using radiation.
Well, that was fascinating. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Kiri. You please me. Your efforts have borne fruit, and that fruit is sweet. Here is some fruit. Ken, you get a dragon fruit, the most Godzilla of all the fruits.
Munch, munch.
Okay, Kiri, you get a lychee.
Oh, yum.
I'd like to thank my guest, Chad Jones from the Collapsed Wavefunction podcast.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you, Chad. Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, everybody. Hey, TIE Fighters. Listen, I love the show, and I hope you do too. But for every listener to the show, I know there are 100 other people who would love to listen, but they don't know how. I want you to spread the word. There are 3 ways you can do this. First is iTunes. Please leave us an iTunes review if you have not. Not only do I like reading what you have to say about all the hard work we do, I also know that the more reviews we get, the higher on the ranks we go. So please, to increase our rank, give us an iTunes review. The second is to teach people how to listen to podcasts. Everybody has a smartphone or tablet these days. There are a variety of ways you can make them listen to podcasts very easily. There's the Stitcher app. Just download the Stitcher app, look for our show. Real easy. Another way is the Podiversity app. Lots of fun. Download the Podiversity app. It has the Titanium Physicists, and we get a cut from every time somebody listens to our episode. Last way is to tell people online about us. The internet's full of people trying to explain physics to each other. Just get in there and tell them about our show. Well, that's it. Okay, that's it for the main part of today's show. Remember, if you like listening to scientists talk about science in their own words, you might like other shows on the Brachytherapy Media Network, like Astrarium about astronomy, or Science Sort of about science, sort of, or Technically Speaking about engineering, or the Collapsed Wavefunction about chemistry.
Yeah.
Editing for the Titanium Physicist podcast is provided by a gentleman named John Heath. Thanks, John. The intro to our show is by Ted Leo and the Pharmacists, and the end song is by John Vanderslice. Until next time, my friends, have a good day, and remember to keep science in your hearts.
Angela, something I gotta tell you, dear, before you come back here. I lost your bunny. I let him out of the cage. He was eating spring mix on the carpet. Jumped through a window out into the haze. Hopped down Magnolia Boulevard.